Chapter 1 in the Communication in Our Lives text is titled The World of Communication. And this kind of serves as an overview chapter of some of the things that we're going to be discussing, but really just laying some groundwork for what is communication. And so I'll start by saying that everyone in here knows what communication is, probably in simple terms. It's one of those things that maybe you've never actually pinned a definition to it, but you know what it is. And so what we're doing is we're taking something that you know and recognize, and we're diving deep throughout the semester into how it works, what works, what doesn't work, and just the different facets of the field. So if communication is something that you really enjoy, this is probably going to be really fascinating. If communication is something that you struggle with, and this may be a grind at times. I think that everybody in every subject, no matter what class you're taking in college, there's going to be times where you really feel a connection and an engagement with the content. And there will be times that maybe you struggle with that. So it's my goal to try and make this as relevant and applicable to what you're doing on a daily basis as possible. And the world of communication kind of starts with the 30,000 foot view of that topic. So I'm going to start with a question and really more of a statement, and I don't have research to back this up, but I think it's safe to say that we are more connected than we have ever been, and I could probably put connected in quotation marks there. If I were in person, I would do air quotes, for most connected we have ever been, meaning the digital tools that we have make us as connected as we have ever been, just in our ability to communicate with someone. So we have the capability today to, without any lag time, without any stall, to literally get out a little piece of equipment that fits in our pocket, and we're able to see somebody's face all the way across the world for free. Because if you FaceTime someone anywhere in the world or use any other number of video chat apps, that just, if you take a step back and you think about how unbelievable that technology is in our ability to just connect with people. Now, obviously, there are parts of the world that don't have as advanced technology as we do. So this is not a universal thing. There's variations in access. But if we're talking about on a large scale, and for everybody in this class, you are more able to connect with people through digital tools and even face-to-face tools, really, than at any other time in history. So it kind of brings about a question. It brings about a lot of questions. Number one, what is authentic connection? We're going to talk about that in this class at some point. But if we are the most connected we've ever been, if we are able to really, with 100 different apps on our phones, be able to communicate with just about anybody we want to at just about any moment, why do we still have problems with communication? If we're so connected and we do this all the time, shouldn't we all be experts? Shouldn't we all be just have flawless communication abilities and never have issues and never run into communication problems? Why do we still have these problems if we are so unbelievably connected? And so, it is obvious we have communication issues. There's no doubt about that. This is why we study it and work to improve it. This is why, in relationships, we are working oftentimes to improve the communication within a relationship, to try and connect in a better way. But why are there still problems with communication if we are so connected? So here's just a few. We could make an exhaustive list, and perhaps if we were in person, maybe we'd get the whiteboard out and start to build out some of these. But let's just talk about a few of these. Number one is an oversaturation of messages. Because we are so connected, to the point of the previous slide, because we are so unbelievably connected, we see more messages probably. And again, I don't have the research to back this up, but you could make the argument, it's certainly plausible that we see more messages and process more messages than anyone in history. So let's just take social media as an example. We will talk about social media a lot in this class in different contexts. But just social media, just a scroll, you're seeing dozens of messages at a time. Whatever particular app is your choice app, you're seeing all of those messages. And just advertising alone, you see about, on average, about 5,000 advertisements per day. So yeah, some of those are TV or social media or billboards or whatever, but they show up a lot more places than you think. You see it on T-shirts and you see it on other gear, and as you're driving down the road, signs that are sticking up on the side of the road and stuff like that. We're just so overly saturated with messages that a lot of times it just becomes information overload. Our brains are not capable of fully processing all of the messages that we get. And so think about, have you ever had an issue of communication with another individual, with a person, and that stemmed from you were just exhausted from a long day of communicating? Have you ever had that day before? I have them all the time where it's been a really, really long day. I've talked to a lot of people, or I've had to do a lot of reading, or I've had to be on my computer all day long, and my brain is just saturated with information and it's exhausting. And I get home and I struggle to clearly and effectively communicate with my wife and with my kids because I'm just so oversaturated with information that it's like I need to go for a run or I need to go work out, or I need to take a shower or drink another cup of coffee or something to like wash off all the messages. That creates a problem in our communication. Another is misunderstanding. We obviously have misunderstanding in communication, and for a variety of reasons. Misunderstanding can be the product of, just two down from this, distraction, right? Misunderstanding can happen but sometimes we just misunderstand what somebody says. We have our own filter for how communication comes in, and so we misunderstand what somebody says. Cues filtered out. So cues filtered out basically is when we don't have nonverbal cues. So nonverbal cues, we're going to talk about this later, but nonverbal cues are all of the things other than verbal communication. The verbs are verbal communication is the literal words that are being spoken, and the nonverbal communication is everything else. Your tone of voice, your facial expression, anything that you're doing with your body, the way that you're sitting, your posture, all of those things say message. All of those are messages that you're sending that are apart from your words. Now, they may be connected to your words. Obviously, my tone of voice, if I talk like this all the time and I have no vocal inflection and I have no changes, obviously that is an impact on my verbal communication. You're not going to get my verbal communication as well if I don't use some nonverbal vocal cues and things like that. But the more of those nonverbal cues that are filtered out, the more problems we tend to have with communication. That's why you can misinterpret text messages. Okay, so if you misinterpret a text message because you think it was written in an angry tone and the person actually wrote it and they weren't angry, maybe they were sad, or maybe they were indifferent. They just were trying to get information across. Have you ever done that before, where you misinterpreted somebody's email or text to have some sort of emotional connection to it, some sort of attachment, and they didn't mean that at all, and it turns into some kind of problem or misunderstanding because the nonverbal cues didn't exist? That's cues filtered out. So distraction, right? So distraction is a big issue with communication problems, and I talk about this. If you ever come to my office and talk to me, then one of the things that I try really hard to do is turn my body away from my computer screen. This is not because I'm oh so noble and wonderful. It's because I know how prone I am to distraction. And if I see things pop up on my screen, I see an email pop up, or I see a Teams message pop up, or I see a text message pop up, then those things just pull my attention. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. I can't help it. So a lot of times if I'm talking to you, I'm literally going to turn my entire body away from my screen because I want to give you or whoever I'm talking to, I want to give them the attention that they deserve. But distraction can be a lot of different things. It can be multitasking. It can be your phone. Have you ever been talking to somebody and they're just looking at their phone? No communication problem there. Usually it leads to a lot of frustration, possibly, the misinterpretation of messages and stuff like that. And then the constant communication apps. I will be in the middle of something, having a really good conversation, being really productive, and my phone will be in my pocket buzzing, buzz, buzz, buzz. You get on the dreaded group text, right? You get on a group text and there's like 50 messages and you haven't even started the conversation yet because you are actually trying to engage with a human being. But you felt your pocket buzzing the whole time, and because your pocket is buzzing the whole time, you are distracted. That's obviously a communication problem. And then on the personal side, not so much the technology side, but on the personal side, just simple pride. Sometimes we have a bias against somebody that causes us not to listen to them, or we're upset with them, or we don't want to open up and be authentic with somebody or honest with somebody because we want to save face or because we're embarrassed or whatever it would be. The list goes on and on and on. There are all kinds of problems in communication, which leads us to the question, why do we study communication? And again, if we're talking about this as one of the oldest things in the world. Communication started from the foundation, right? Communication had to happen for any advancement of mankind or civilization. Communication had to happen. So we've been doing this forever, and but we still study it, and we still try to get better, and we still aim to improve this skill so that we can be effective human beings. So studying communication is a necessity. It improves our skills, helps make sense of what happens in our lives. It increases our personal impact. And what other things? What other reasons should we study communication? There's some very practical reasons, because it's going to make you more successful in your career. Just quite simply, if you, whatever field you want to go into, if you are a good communicator, it will set you apart immediately. The ability to communicate well it's in a lot of ways an intangible skill, but that doesn't mean it can't be learned. It's for some people, communication comes naturally, but it does not mean at all that it's just a nature thing and not a nurture thing. This is something that we develop and we practice, and that you get better at with time and with work. So there's a very practical reason for studying communication, but it's also just like to understand the world around us, to understand people and relationships. There's a whole relational aspect to this that if you're a good communicator, you can really have good success in relationships, in building relationships, in resolving conflict. So many relationships struggle because of the inability to resolve conflict or come to agreement on issues, and strong communication skills can really help with that. Okay, so as we work through some of these definitions and some of the different things that we're talking about here, I'm going to go pretty quickly because we're going to break a lot of this stuff down as the semester goes. So this is not, if I go over something quickly, it doesn't mean we're done talking about it. It may just be that that's coming down the road in week 3, 4, 5, whatever. But the book defines communication as a systemic process in which people interact with and through symbols to create and interpret meanings. Again, this is one of those things you probably never would have penned that definition, but if you look at it, this is basically what communication is. So it is a process. Communication is typically ongoing and always in motion. That doesn't mean that a conversation doesn't end, but communication rarely has a very clear start and stop in terms of conversation when we're going back and forth with somebody, even from the larger scale, mass media and different things like that. It is a process. It is always ongoing, particularly in long-term relationships or relationships where you're spending a lot of time with another person, be it friendship or romantic or even just like professional, somebody who you're in class with. It's ongoing. It's always a process, and it's always even if it takes pauses, it's still always a process. It occurs in a system of interrelated parts that affect one another. So that can be as simple as a conversation. You have interrelated parts. You have people who are talking. It's within some kind of system, and it uses symbols. All language and many nonverbal behaviors, anything that abstractly signifies something else. So that's again, pretty simply just saying we have these symbols called letters. You put those letters together and you make a word. You put words together and you make a sentence. And within our system, the system of whatever, our culture, you could identify it as a lot of different things. But in our system as humans, we have created languages which are symbols put together that which create words which are symbols, and we use those, and we use our nonverbal behaviors as well, that to signify something. So again, this is very elemental, and those symbols have meanings. So we bestow something on phenomena, whatever it signifies to us. So those words, those gestures, what people do, it all has a meaning that we have given on to it. So when somebody acts in a certain way toward us and they say something, maybe they're angry and they say something hurtful, we interpret that communication and we identify a meaning to it. And that is what creates the understanding of communication. So a few different values of communication. Communication is the primary way that we connect with other people. If you, again, in pretty simple terms, if we didn't communicate, there wouldn't be any human race. There wouldn't be human interaction, because even looking at somebody, making eye contact is communication. But we also do a lot of talking, and we do a lot of texting, and we do a lot of everything else, living life together. There's a huge relationship value to communication, and so effective communication sustains relationships. It solves problems, resolves conflict, is used, as I mentioned a couple slides ago, for self-disclosure, for the ability to open up and be honest and authentic and real with people. And day-to-day communication becomes very important, because that's what creates relationships. There's a psychologist named Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he has I've really only seen it on Instagram. I've seen lots of things that he's done, but he talks about in one of his Instagram videos, so I'm going to kind of butcher this, but the spirit of it is he says that, he says, life is not sitting on a beach in Mexico sipping margaritas. He says, that's not life. He says, life is, he says, that's a moment. If that's a moment, he says, what life really is life is the way that you're greeted at the door when you get home by, your spouse, if you're married, or your family, or your friends. Life is just the little interactions that you have throughout the day. Life is the friendships that just grow out of a shared interest. It's the little things that add up into the big things, meaning that we spend so much time thinking about like really big picture things and the large scale impact on our life, and sometimes we lose sight of the importance of telling somebody I love you every day, the right person, or the person in your life that deserves to hear that every day, right? So whatever that relationship might be, or telling the people in your life that have value, that they have value, or just even things that may seem small, but just engaging over a shared interest and stuff, and developing trust and developing relations. That happens in small bite-sized pieces. It doesn't happen overnight, and it so rarely happens where it's just like, yeah, I've met this person, we've been hanging out a week, and now we're best friends. Okay, so that doesn't happen. It comes with day-to-day communication that builds relationships, and over time, those become the most trusted and important people in our life. It's those little things that add up to the big things, and that's why communication is so important, because all of those little things are managed by our communication. So communication also has professional value. Communication skills are closely linked with professional success. What you will find when you get into the professional world is if you are a strong communicator, you have the ability to communicate well with people, to handle conflict, to handle difficult situations, or even just to get out in front of conflict by effectively communicating in front of things. The ability to recognize when there is a problem before it becomes a problem and communicating to deal with that. Those are really, really important skills whenever you get into professional areas, whatever that ends up being, whether you go into corporate America or whether you travel the world doing something, or whether you become a teacher, or whether you become anything, fill in the blank, whether you get into any industry. Those communication skills not only are gonna make life and work more satisfying and more effective, but it's probably going to give you an edge to some extent professionally. Poor communication can increase the occurrence of mistakes, repetition, and bad productivity. There is great value in being a strong communicator. It also has cultural value. Communication, to be effective citizens in a democracy, we have to be able to express and evaluate ideas. And what that's talking about is we, as a citizen run civilization, which is what we are. We elect our officials, and frequently we could have a much longer discussion. I'll keep this brief because we can have another longer discussion about this maybe another time. But we talk about that at times it feels like we are seeing the degradation, the struggle of civil discourse and the ability to effectively discuss important issues without descending into chaos. So what I mean by that is get into election season and just see how much bickering goes on, and look at when we're dealing with maybe something important that has to happen within our culture. That can be political or otherwise, right? It doesn't always have to be politics, but a lot of times this plays out in politics. It could just play out in cultural issues where we can't have a civil conversation because we've learned, or maybe we just have not learned how to communicate in a way that is both respectful of somebody else, but still being able to hold to our own convictions. So in order to be effective citizens in a democracy, we have to be able to express, evaluate ideas, both our own and others, and be able to communicate in a way that is productive and that doesn't just mean we all get along and kumbaya, because that's never going to happen. But perhaps there is somewhere to be found where we can still have our convictions and do it in a way that is productive. So effective participation in social life requires good communication skills across diverse cultures. So that's both within our culture and with other cultures. Intercultural communication becomes extremely important, especially if you, again, do anything that's in a diverse area. If you end up living in a very diverse area where you have to be able to effectively communicate with different cultures, or really regardless, there's not a lot of places that live in a vacuum anymore. And if you live abroad, obviously this becomes a very, very important, and there's a value here within culture for communication. All right, so the next thing, I told you I'm going to go quickly. I'm trying to keep this. I understand. Let me say this. I understand that these narrated PowerPoints can really be a beating sometimes. I really tried to keep them as concise as I possibly can. So I'm going to really quickly go through 3 models of communication. This is an early model of communication that was developed early on, I believe in the 1940s, where some communication theorists and professionals said, we need to come up with a model of communication. We need to come up with something that describes communication. Okay, so you have a sender, which sends a message to a receiver, and there's noise. Okay, so this is really, really simple. Right now, I'm the sender. I'm sending the message to you. You are the receiver. And noise is anything that inhibits the ability of the receiver to receive the message. So that can be literal noise. If you are watching this video, but at the same time you have your phone out and you're scrolling through TikTok and you're watching TikTok videos that have the sound on, then that's noise. That is inhibiting the message from being properly received. But noise can also be our frame of mind. It can be our distractions. It can be our mood. It can be all kinds of things, anything that's keeping us from effectively getting a message. So this is the linear model of communication, and it's really, really simple. So think about this. How rarely is communication just this simple? Because there's one really, really big problem with this, is that this implies that the receiver never sends a message back. So if all communication was literally just one direction, we would never have any conversations. Somebody would just say something to the other. So that leads into this really important addition of feedback, right? So we have now a source that's essentially same as sender, but that is the origin of the message, which goes across a channel, which arrives at a receiver. Noise is still a factor, and the receiver sends feedback back to the source. Okay, we're getting closer here, right? We're getting a little bit more accurate in what communication really looks like. So the improvement here is that we now have a feedback loop. Okay, so if I'm communicating to you, let's say we were face to face. Okay, so this is a little bit different than selection. Let's say we were face to face and we were having a conversation, and I'm sending a message to you, and now you are receiving that message and you're talking back to me. Okay, we're getting a little bit closer. Obviously, noise is still involved. Context is kind of brought in here, where now we're understanding that all communication happens within some kind of context. But this really still oversimplifies the process, particularly of face-to-face communication. By the way, I would be doing this a lot slower if we were face-to-face. We would be having a few more examples of this. But let's now get on to the transactional model. So this is what we would consider a much more accurate representation of authentic communication. So you notice that you now have two communicators. We don't have a sender and a receiver because it's just not that simple. Both parties are communicating, and both parties you see sends and receives. These are the purple balloons on each side, where a communicator is sending and receiving. You notice that they are decoding the messages back. And there's a word that's not in this particular model, but if you look at some of them, there's encoding. So you are both encoding, you're both creating messages, and you're decoding, you're processing messages at the same time. So those messages are having constant feedback with the other communicator, and you see that there's noise all across. The squiggly lines are the noise, and it's all done within those particular environments. And then you see that even the environment A and environment B, I live in my environment, you live in your environment, but there's somewhere in the middle, which is the messages that we're having right now. There's a shared environment. So this is where it kind of starts to get a little bit convoluted, but it's probably, again, a more accurate model of what communication is, because a true conversation is not, realistically, a true conversation is not, I say something to you, you say something to me. I say something to you, you say something to me. Usually there is, even if nothing else, even if we're in that sort of just one-to-one tossing the ball back and forth, at the very least, I'm giving nonverbal cues back to you as you're talking. I might be nodding, I might be smiling, I might be, I might be angry, I might, I might roll my eyes. That's all communication. That's all messages that I am sending back to you at the very moment that you are also communicating. So I'm decoding what you're saying. I'm encoding nonverbal cues, though nonverbal cues are sometimes you don't really think about how you're encoding those. We'll get to that another day. But this is the realistic side of communication. This is the realistic model of what communication looks like. And again, the purpose of this is just so we can understand. If we understand communication better, if we see this transactional model and we say, you know what, I'm communicating with somebody and I'm completely in my own context without considering their context. That's the reason we study these, is only so it can inform us and help us become better communicators. Okay, stick with me. Just a few slides left, and I'm going to go as quickly as I can here. Let's just talk about the field of communication, and I'm just going to quickly define these. They're in your textbook. Intrapersonal communication is the communication we have with ourselves. Interpersonal communication is communication that we have with others. And all of these are areas of study, and they're areas of, quite frankly, in a lot of ways, professional areas. Group communication is what it sounds like, the ability to communicate with small groups, with teams. This is an extremely important skill for coaches to have, for teachers to have, for people who maybe are like middle managers in a business. If you're a middle manager and you're in charge of, say, 8 people, you're not running the company, but you have a team of people. Group communication becomes extremely important. Understanding group dynamics, understanding that where teams get hung up with and communication. Organizational communication is how does communication work within organizations. This is a whole field in itself. Health communication is a big field. How do health organizations communicate with the public? If you see public service announcements about potential medications that you could take, or vaccines, or when we're getting informed about things like COVID, that's all health communication. And also there's an advertising element of that. There are companies who are advertising their products in the context of health. There's mass communication. Mass communication is what we would think of like the media, the mass media. So that's your radio, TV, newspaper. A lot of the web is mass media. Not all of it, but a lot of the web is mass media. Even a little bit of social media, and then all of that feeds into digital media. We will spend some time on that. But digital media, that's your basically everything that utilizes the internet for its dissemination. So that's your apps, your social media, your websites, things like that. That's all digital media. Public communication is much like public speaking, the ability to talk to the general public in a certain way to large groups of people. And intercultural communication, the ability to communicate across different cultures. So that's a lot. I could spend a lot of time talking about each of those, and we will more and more. That's why I say I'm going to go through this quickly, and we're just laying the groundwork for the different things that we're going to cover. So some unifying themes, I'll just do this quickly because we've already talked about symbols and meaning. Critical thinking becomes super important in communication. We're also going to talk about ethics in this course, and what is the ethical way to communicate, ways that are honest and non-manipulative, and that are effective as much as possible for all parties involved. A few careers, kind of already mentioned some of this, and I'm going to talk about this a lot more in this semester, because I know that some of you, whether you major in communication or not, you may get into some kind of career that has a big communication element. So education is a big thing. Media production, analysis, criticism, training, consulting, HR management, research, and quite frankly, that media side has just jobs galore right now, because the more digital we become, the more we need people who can manage that, who can both create content, who can share content, who can design websites to hold it, that can code those things. There's all kinds of careers in communication, and we'll kind of hit on that as we go. If we're talking about group communication, then we're going to be talking about some of the possibilities, not just with a communication degree, but with strong communication skills. Yeah, we'll talk about a communication degree, but most of you in this class probably aren't communication majors, so we're going to talk about how this benefits your career just as much as maybe available careers within that. Okay, so this is the last slide. Stick with me for just a second. We are going to pull in this conversation of digital media a lot, and here's why. you do so much of your communicating now through digital means. And, my personal argument is that it is too much of our communication happens through digital means. I'm just a little bit old school in that, but I'm also fully understand and recognize that these digital tools are not going anywhere. Our phones are not going anywhere. Social media is not going anywhere. And in a lot of ways, it was extremely helpful, particularly over the last couple of years, to have really robust digital tools to be able to stay connected and to be able to continue to get our education and to continue to work and things of that nature. So there is some value here in maintaining personal relationships through social media. It says it just does these specifics in the books like job searches and civil engagement. There's far more that you could list as the value of digital communication. Now, when we have a little more time to talk about digital media, one of the arguments that I'll present at some point is whether or not the values outweigh the detriments when it comes to our use of digital tools. And there's a couple of resources out there and a couple of thinkers who would argue that digital tools are wonderful when they're used the way that they need to be used and in a healthy way. And a lot of us don't necessarily do that in a healthy way. So if regardless of your major, if you take social media and communication with me, we cover a lot of that. So I'll maybe touch on it at times in this course, but a lot of that discussion of, is this worth the time we're putting into it? But there's obviously some drawbacks, delayed feedback, missed meaning, lack of contextual cues, those things that are lost whenever we maintain our communication and our relationships through digital tools. We will talk about all of this more. This is a very, very worthwhile conversation, certainly in the year 2023, and for all of you who are probably to some degree and maybe to a large degree doing a lot of digital communication. We will discuss that more. So again, this has been the very, very quick overview of what does communication look like? What is this world of communication that we're in? And we're going to dive much deeper as we go. So again, I know that this was fast and I know that it was a little bit long, but we want to hit some of these important things that we're going to dig into deeper as we go.